Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Pursuant to Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted virtually. In-person attendance, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and we are not doing this at all in person. We're doing it completely virtually. This meeting may be accessed remotely through Zoom and or Facebook. Agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Those items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and will be broadcast. Meeting is also being recorded by the committee recorder, other members of the committee, and members of the audience. Minutes will be transcribed and made public and posted to our website once approved. I'm going to do a roll call because I'm not sure who's here, and for the public who want to know who's here too. So Ann Hutchinson.
Yes.
Jason St. Peter.
Here.
John Stephen.
Yes.
Bon Buffoni.
Here.
Molly Thomas.
Here.
William Fields.
He's there, Steve.
Yeah, here. Okay. Thank you. Diane Singer.
Here.
Thank you. Horace Haig.
Here.
Rich Mahoney.
Here.
And I'm here, so we have a full house. That's terrific. Let's start with the minutes from November 19th, December 3rd, and December 17th of 2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion and I have a second. Discussion.
You have me down there as being part of the school committee on the 1st December one, the 3rd, I think.
Yeah.
I was not a member of the committee at that point.
Okay. You spoke a lot, so we promoted you.
Exactly.
Motion to amend as stated by Sean.
I
So
threw in my two
motion.
cents, so I got put on as the board member, but
Yes.
I shouldn't be considered a board member during that meeting.
Okay, so with that change, I have a motion and a second. Anything else? Roll call vote. Ann.
Yes.
Jason.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Bonnie.
Aye.
Molly.
Aye.
Bill.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes. Yes.
Corey.
Aye.
Rich.
Yes.
And I, it's a unanimous vote. Peter, turn it over to you, the superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Tonight, I'm gonna start with a little bit of good news, then a couple donations, then I'm gonna talk about a memorandum of understanding for the paraprofessionals. And then I really think the bulk of tonight's meeting is gonna be about two things. Me addressing some of the data points that I've been using to support or inform decisions I've been making around what approach to schooling we're going to be in, and then a little discussion about our schedule and time. So let me start with the good news. I'm just going to share this because this is sort of cool and hopefully you can all see it. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So that is our the sign for our renamed middle school, the W.E.B. Du Bois Middle School, is now done. I know a lot of people are at home and not in the schools right now, so that's my amateur photography 20 minutes before the meeting, but that's done. I'm really excited about it. Next meeting, I'll bring to the group that we have an anonymous donor who's offered to pay for all the costs connected to the renaming. So that'll be the signage and letterhead and a few other things, and I'll formally bring that to you for your approval. But I did want you to see the new signage, and it's on both sides of that, so that's good. Okay. Other things, we have a donation to our horticulture program, and I'd like your approval to accept that.
A little more about it, Peter?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sharon, are you on the call, and can you speak to it? I just don't have it right in front of me. I believe.
If you
Oh,
want.
you can. Yeah, that's even better.
Okay. So Lynn Berry donated $750 to the horticulture program at the high school in honor of her mother, who recently passed away and was an avid gardener. So we received that donation, and we'd like your approval to accept it.
That's terrific.
Good.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
I have a motion by Rich, a second by Bill. Any discussion? All votes in virtual meetings are roll call. So Ann,
Yes.
Jason,
Aye.
Don,
Absolutely, and thank you very much.
Bonnie,
Aye.
Molly,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Corey,
Aye.
Rich,
Yes.
and I will also echo that. Thank you very much. Very generous. It's unanimous.
Okay, wonderful. And get ready to vote again, because I have another one. Since the agenda was shared, I received a $500 anonymous donation for the wrestling program. And I'd also like to ask for your approval to accept that donation.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
I have a motion by Jason, a second by Sean. Any discussion? A roll call vote. Ann,
Yes.
Jason,
Aye.
Sean,
aye, and again, thank you.
Bonnie,
Aye.
Molly,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Corey,
Aye.
Rich,
Yes.
and I. It's unanimous. And again, thank you to the anonymous donor. Very generous.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you all. And I think it's a wonderful legacy when folks decide to support the school or special program at any one of the schools. So again, I really appreciate that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is a brief memorandum of understanding between the district and Unit C of the Berkshire Hills Educational Association. Unit C represents paraprofessionals and recently secretaries. There's obviously the state minimum wage went up this year. And while we talked about this in negotiations, we missed it a little bit because the state minimum wage goes up by the calendar year, not the school fiscal year. So what the memorandum of understanding proposes is that paraprofessionals who are currently being paid $12.75 an hour will have, just on the first step, right? People in their first year working for us will have their salary increased this year to $13.50. And then next year, as the minimum wage goes up again, that in the contract, their salary would be $14.10. And we're recommending that next year it goes up to $14.25. Everything else stays the same. People on step 2 and higher already above the standard. So this is just correcting something for a small number of people that are below it. School districts are, I guess, exempt from it, but we're competing against other entities that would hire people. So we think it's the right and smart thing to at least meet that standard. I sent this to the school committee as an email. I can read it into the record if somebody wants me to do, if that's helpful. But I'm asking for your support on this.
I think someone should read it into the record because it wasn't in the packet because, it was a late nature.
Okay, so
And
let
from the negotiating committee's point of view, this was the intention, as Peter said. It's just we got our calendar year and school year a little mixed up.
Okay, so let me read it out loud. The Berkshire Hills Regional School District and the Berkshire Hills Education Association, Unit C, BHEAC, hereby agree to the following terms and conditions and understandings regarding a change to step 1 of the salary schedule for paraprofessionals, since it was the intention of both parties that the starting rate would be no less than the minimum wage set by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the calendar year that begins in each of the fiscal years of the contract. Therefore, the district and BHEAC agree to the following. The rate for step 1 in fiscal year 21 shall be increased to $13.50. Any paraprofessionals hired in fiscal year 21 shall receive this new rate beginning on January 1st, 2001 and continue through June 30th, 2021 and continue through June 30th, 2021. The new rate for step 1 in fiscal year 22 beginning on July 1, 2021 shall be $14.25. All other rates in the salary schedule for fiscal years 21, 22, and 23 shall remain the same.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Rich, a second by Bill. Do I have any discussion?
Yeah, Peter, I just want to make sure this is clear. This is statewide. This is not that we're giving people promotions or paying them more. This is a state minimum wage.
We're meeting the state minimum wage for people who are on step 1 who currently are below the minimum wage. We thought we had addressed this in negotiations, but we got caught up on whether it was we addressed it in our fiscal year, but we didn't address it in the context of the calendar year.
Yeah, these are standard minimum wage increases that are happening every year.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Anyone else?
Yeah, is this enough to be able to hire and retain paras? I've understood that there were paras who were interested in being hired but refused once they found out how little they'd be paid.
No, this is just trying to address the state minimum wage issue. The bigger question, Ann, that you're asking, which is a very good one, is what's a competitive wage to recruit and retain folks, and that probably holds true at every level, right? But particularly for our lowest paid employees. I would like to address that, but I don't want to address that tonight. I think that should be addressed more formally in the context of either or both negotiations and budgeting. Right, it's hard. What you're saying, and I'll try to be clear about it. It's hard to recruit people early on the salary schedule. It gets a little easier later on the salary schedule, but the first few years are hard, and I think it's fairly common that principals interview candidates, and then candidates hear about the salary, and they say, I like your people, I like the school, I like the kids, the benefits are great, but the salary I can't make work. So I think we need to continue to address that in other contexts.
Anyone else? I have a motion, I have a second. Roll call vote. Ann,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
John,
Yes, please.
Bonnie,
Aye.
Molly,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and yes, it's unanimous.
Okay, so thank you. I think that's an important thing, and I appreciate your support there. What I'm going to do now, and indulge me a little bit, I'm going to shift and I'll share a couple screens, but I want to start talking a little bit about COVID-19 and data, and my process to review data and make decisions, and some of the sources that I look at. So the first document I'm going to share is just sort of a high level overview of it. And then I'll actually dig into specific documents and talk you through it. The only bummer about when I am sharing my screen and showing things is I can not see a whole lot of you. And that's unfortunate, because it's better to try to sort of gauge people's reactions to things. So Steve, I'll use you as an extra set of eyes as I'm doing it.
Yep.
Okay.
And Peter, while you're setting it up, I'll just explain. Peter will go through this explanation. School committee will be asked questions. And then if there's anyone in the audience after the school committee's done who wants to speak for up to 3 minutes, instead of waiting to the end of the meeting, we'll let you do that after the school committee's done.
Okay. And just sort of before I get going, I understand both the context and the impact of my decisions around this, and obviously, or hopefully obviously, I don't make them lightly. There are considerations about safety and student and staff health. There are considerations about students, and particularly their mental health as this drags on and on. There are considerations about families and their time, and what being remote does to families and their own professional obligations. There are more factors than you can possibly imagine. And earlier, sort of in the summer and the start of the school year, I learned much more about HVAC than I thought I'd ever know. More recently, I sort of feel like I'm moonlighting as an epidemiologist, trying to make sense of extraordinarily complicated data sets. And then occasionally, as sort of I get responses from folks, and they really are on all sides of the issue, I feel more like a social worker or a psychologist as people struggle through this. So very complicated and really challenging. So again, like I really appreciate parents and students and families' patience through what just the most extraordinary and challenging of times. So let me start with this first thing, which is the overview, and then we'll jump right into the data. Okay, so once a week, I meet with this joint labor management or joint health and safety committee. And there are 3 school committee members who are on it. There are, I think, 5 teachers. 2 of the people that are on the committee are nurses, and one of them, Steve, is a pharmacist. So there's some good knowledge there. I also check in regularly with the public health nurse, with the local folks in different roles in the health departments, and occasionally with pediatricians and other medical professionals and emergency planners from both Fairview and BMC. So again, I'm going to do like a high level overview and then we'll go into the two things. There's a group called COVID-19 Now, and in a minute I'll go through that. And that's the nonprofit website that appears in the Eagle often. And there are 3 data points there: new cases, infection rate, and positivity rate. And I look at that quite a bit. There's the State Department of Public Health data, and that highlights county positivity, and then our 3 member towns plus other towns that I look at, particularly Pittsfield, Lee, Lenox, Sheffield, Richmond, New Marlboro, Monterey, on and on and on. And we'll go through those and I'll show you some of that. And then there's local data, which is tied to clusters and cases by building. And I try to separate that by in school and out of school, and if those folks had the capacity to transmit COVID-19 to their colleagues, peers, or classmates. And I go through that by building. There are a whole host of potentially other contributing factors. All of the data lags a little bit. So sometimes I get leading indicators from public health people that aren't yet reported. And then often those numbers come to fruition when the reports come out. When I meet with this group, the group makes a recommendation to me, and sometimes competing recommendations or several recommendations, and I try to make sense of all of that. And then I share my likely plan. Then I try to communicate that to everybody. In an ideal world, I would share these decisions days, if not weeks in advance. But sometimes the state data comes out on Thursday nights. Last week, for example, the state data came out and it was incomplete, and I didn't get the information until Friday morning. So then I had to meet with my group, and that's why I made an announcement about the next week on a Friday evening. I get that that's sort of crummy and less than ideal, and I try to not do that. And I'll do what I can to get ahead of it, particularly if we're making a big shift. The one exception to that would be if for some reason the data changes dramatically and we just need to close, then I could pivot to close on a dime, right? So I feel better about closing quickly and opening or expanding our offerings, ideally with a little more notice. And again, I get this can be really hard on kids to sort of yo-yo around, really hard on families around childcare and work obligations, and really hard on staff around planning. And in some ways, particularly on staff of, and it's different at every grade level, but staff of young children that tend to do a lot of hands-on things. If they knew we were changing, they would make different shifts. But the high school people will argue that they need significant notice and warning too. Okay, so that's the first one. What I want to share now, and hopefully this will go seamlessly, is, can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the COVID Act Now data. And what you'll see is Berkshire County, and this is the whole county, and it says we're in an active outbreak, right? So there's one level worse than where we're at, and there's several levels better. As we go down, and these are the data points, and then I'll go into each of them. There's the daily new cases per 100,000, and Berkshire County sort of neat. There are roughly 125,000 people here, so this works well for us. The infection rate and the positive test rate. So in this first column, and the blue one's highlighted, right? So this is the daily new cases. You scroll down and you see our 54.1 makes us 12th out of, and I could expand it a little, hang on a sec. 12th out of 14 counties in Massachusetts. So this number is high. It's not the highest. And if you go down, and there's all these other things, but this is the chart that represents where we are now in this daily new cases per 100,000. So a couple days ago, it peaked at 60.8 per 100,000. And this is a classic one that could be a leading indicator of the next two. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the infection rate, and probably now you all get really interested in this, and you'll all be doing this. If you click on the infection rate column, right, it shifts to blue, and you see we're 1.18. What's probably more interesting, and they're a little bunch because they're all around that, give or take a little bit, but now Berkshire County's number one, right? And this is where we don't want to be number one. So Berkshire County's 1.18, Barnstable's 1.15, so on and so forth. If you scroll down, and now it's the second one, you see we're in the high area, and hopefully this trend here will continue. So on the 6th, and it takes a few days for the data to go from a dotted line to a solid line, which means that it's confirmed, right? But in November, we peaked at, on November, I don't know, 7th, we peaked at 1.42. And then it came down and it came right back into the green. And then it was the unconfirmed data around the 2nd was 1.23. And then after they confirmed it, it came a little down. And now we're in a trend where it may be coming down a little bit. Everybody following that?
Yep.
Okay. So now I'm going to go back. And the third one is the positive test rate, right? So the place in Massachusetts that's really taking a beating right now is Bristol County. And their positive test rate is 13.3. And we come down to us and we're at 5.3. So then I'll go back down to that chart. And you'll see here we're at 5.3. For a little while, right around the 1st, we were at 5.6 before the data got corrected. So in the first one, the daily new cases were at critical. And when we were up here, we were almost above critical, right? Now it's starting to come down a little bit. In the infection rate, we're in high, and hopefully we're back on our way down to medium or low. And in the positive test rate, we're at medium. Okay? There are a bunch of other things here that are neat. They're recommended. It talks a little bit about sort of who this is informed by. So the White House Coronavirus Task Force, the Harvard Global Health Institute, and the CDC. And then there's a whole bunch of recommendations. So the recommendations are travel should be avoided unless necessary, masks should be mandated in all indoor spaces and worn by everyone outside their home, gyms should max out at 25%, schools enable remote learning for all students, all government levels should invest in remote learning, gatherings, the 25 people, stay out of the bars, and they should be required to close, and restaurants, but like maybe you could have outdoor restaurants in Arizona, but outdoor restaurants in Berkshire County in the middle of winter may not make the most sense, right? And some of these are not aligned with Massachusetts guidelines. They're just broader. Okay, so this is an important data set from a county perspective, but it doesn't give us all the data. In other communities, they have more data about the intensive care unit capacity, if tracers are hired, and other things. And then there's a whole host of other ones, right? So let me now shift, and I know I'm overwhelming everybody, even myself, with sort of the level of detail on this. Let me shift to the next one. And this is the Department of Public Health weekly COVID report. So they issue a weekly report on Thursday nights, and then they also issue a daily report. And if you're Facebook friends with Tricia Farley Bouvier, she always posts slides from the daily report on Facebook. I tend to look myself and with the Joint Health and Safety Committee at this whole report. It's like a 60-page report. And this just came out like an hour ago. So all sorts of stuff, more information than you could ever need, different kinds of settings, long-term care facilities, correctional facilities, on and on and on. In this report, I really focus on the town by town analysis. So I'm gonna go, and it could be any one town, but I'm gonna start in this one with Great Barrington. But like I mentioned, I really look at a lot of them, and sorry for the fast scrolling. So you see Great Barrington here, and Great Barrington is in
Relative change higher.
red,
Yeah.
right? And the average, I gotta figure out how to move you guys. Okay, the average daily incident rate per 100,000 for the last 14 days, so it's a bit of a rolling average, is 85. The relative change is higher, and the percent positive is 4.71. If you think back to the COVID-19 chart that I was showing you, and this number 85 here, I think this 4.71 will likely go up, right? So one of our towns, Great Barrington, is at 4.71. The next one that I'm going to go to, and then I'll bounce around and I'll come back to other towns, but is Stockbridge. And when you look at Stockbridge is now in yellow, and the average daily incident is 87.9, but the percent positivity is 6.01, and it's also higher, right? So that potentially is a point of concern. West Stockbridge last week was, I think, a little higher than it is now, and I'll share that. So West Stockbridge is here, was so this week it's 30.4, and the percent positivity is 2.96. Off the top of my head, last week the percent positivity was 4. So those are 3-member towns, right? But then the story just gets more complicated because, and I'll ask you, Bill, because you've been around a while and you know things. How many communities do you think our district serves, both from a student perspective and from towns where staff live? Pick a number between 1 and whatever. Bill, are you muted?
I would say I think we were impacted by at least 6 to 8.
Okay,
Pittsfield, I think all the towns in Berkshire County. Then we go into New York State. We have employees both in Connecticut and New York State too.
yeah, no, that's a totally reasonable assumption. It ends up the number of communities that feed into our school from an employee or a student perspective is 39,
Wow.
right? So then you go back and you start looking at sorry, I got to move my images of you guys. Then you start looking at some of our larger feeder communities. So and I'll just show a couple, but one of the larger ones is Pittsfield, right? So Pittsfield is 62.1, and it's 5.81% positivity, and it's higher. And then just because it's Otis is one of ours. Otis is a small community. It's 30.4, but it's 6.87. A lot in the news about both Lee and Lennox, and they're sort of going in different directions. So let's look at them. So Lee 64.9 and 7.33, and it's actually getting a little better. And Lennox, which was very high, is now 29.6 and 2.38, right? So I could go through town by town. Tyringham got really dinged. New Marlboro, Monterey, where we have a lot of students and staff from, did. So this contributes, okay? So I'm gonna pause there, and I'm gonna go to one more data point that I think is important. And this chart, as I share it, is going to look a little funny. And it's looking a little funny because we've been on break. And that's why you'll see only numbers in some columns, right? So to the best of my knowledge, this is where we have active cases of COVID-19, but everybody's out of school. So there's not the opportunity for transmission within the school, but there are 3 cases at Muddy Brook, 3 at Du Bois, and 2 from the high school. There are only 10 of us in the district office, and for the moment, there's nobody there. At some point when we're back in session, it's likely that these other columns would be, like when we're physically back in session, it's likely that the other columns would have some numbers in them. But because first we were on break for the winter break, and now we're working largely remotely, we don't have any cases in school. Okay. I'm gonna unstop sharing so I can see people. So that gives you some context for the decisions I'm making. Obviously, there are arguments on all sides of this, right? Some people would maybe like us to be remote till the end of the year in June. And those folks are prioritizing safety, perhaps to a fault. And some people would look at and interpret these numbers and say the potential impact to students' mental health and well-being is such that even with these numbers and a lot of stuff in the red, we should be in school right now. Where I'm landing on this is a little bit in between, which is we're doing some remote learning for this week and next week, and then it's my hope and intention that the numbers get better and we're in a position to come back. It's also my hope and intention and the pre-K teacher corrected me on this. There's sort of a couple corresponding things. I'd like to have the kindergarten through sixth graders in person, assuming we can do that safely. The pre-K is a larger class, so the proposed plan there is some of those students would be in 4 days a week, and some of those students would rotate in a hybrid model because we can't have all the students and the teachers and the paras in that room. As we get to 7th through 12th grade, my proposal then would be the hybrid model where kids are in school face-to-face for a couple days a week and working remotely. And particularly then for the 7th to 12th graders, a likely iteration of some version of what we've called cohort A, where our highest needs students would be in school 4 days a week and the other students would be in the other way. Some of this has to be negotiated and finalized and worked through, but that sort of outlines a direction. So that's where we are. I think it makes sense, maybe Steve, first to respond to school committee questions, and then more broadly other ones if there are some.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So school committee, if you have questions, now's the time, or comments.
I was just going to comment on that. I think the data that Peters has shown us is indicative of how complex this whole thing is. And I've gotten emails from people who are talking about our positivity rate and things like that. I just think that he's doing the best he can, and we are. I'm very concerned with what's going to happen in the next few weeks because the surge for Christmas is just starting. And, you know, we were in the summer very low, and now we're, according to the data, it might be coming down, but certainly if we're having 39 towns that we have some connection with, it would seem to me that we're doing the right thing. We're looking out for our staff. We're looking out for our students. I know it's very difficult, and I know that brings up issues that have been raised by some parents about where their students are in regards to academic achievement and things like that. But to me, safety is the first thing. And I know learning is made up of just more than information being poured in and poured out. So there's opportunities to be made even during this period of time. I just think that Peter's doing a marvelous job at trying to juggle this. And I think he needs all the support that he can get from both us and the community.
Jason.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I just like to echo what Bill said. Looking at the numbers earlier in the year, showed that we should definitely be back significantly. And unfortunately, the numbers show that, it's not that way. And again, it's not just the kids. I mean, they're affected the most, but we're a community, a village, and we have to think of the health and welfare of everyone, the teachers, as well as the elderly in our population, immunocompromised, et cetera. So again, I applaud Peter for making these tough decisions. My main question, though, was just a point of fact. Were you the chart where there was 3 cases at Muddy Brook, 3 at Du Bois, and 2 at the high school? Was that staff members, students, or both included?
It's a combination of both staff and students. What's a little hard is and I checked in with the nurses on this. That's what we believe to be the case with people not being in school. We're not sure that it's all bubbling back to us, right? So there's always the possibility that some people are asymptomatic and positive, and I'm not talking about that. there may be other people who tested positive and the contact tracing hasn't yet gotten back to us, or other things. But it's a combination of both. I could break it out. I don't think I have that right in front of me. And the numbers are so small that if I break it out and I say at the high school, it's one staff person and one student, it's sort of like outing somebody and it'll draw more attention to them. So I intentionally presented them in aggregate.
Okay, and just to follow up, so are those cases, are they strictly self-reported, or is there a government agency that reports if any of the students or staff are, I'm assuming the staff would volunteer, but more so students, is there any way that if they test positive that it gets back to us?
Yeah, it's a little of both. So usually what happens, and I see Becky on the line and she could correct me on this, but usually what happens is a staff person or a parent will self-report it to us. And then within hours, the public health nurse, because they find out essentially at the same time, will also reach out and reinforce it. Maybe once we heard from the public health nurse before we heard from the person. Is that, Becky, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. We're always contacted by the public health nurse, and usually the families tell too, but yes.
Okay.
Next, Sean, do you have a question?
No.
Yeah, who's handling the contact tracing?
So the public health nurses do it, but we contribute to it within the building, right? So if we hear from the public health nurse that patient X tested positive, then usually our nurses put together a report, often with things as detailed as a seating chart in a particular classroom or the range of interactions to help the public health nurse have them get a head start. Then there's this other definition, which is 15 minutes of direct contact or 15 minutes within 24 hours of intermittent contact in aggregate. And that's the definition of a close contact. And then depending on sort of where people fall in that, there are other things to do or actions to take. And I think the classic example of that was at the middle school when we had a class go remote or had a group of people get tested, things like that.
Who's actually making the phone calls though?
The public health nurse, or I mean, they're more than one. They each have their own territory. The school principals and nurses can also be involved to a degree in that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big deal, right? It's like a crazy game of who did I talk to and what happened, and it grows exponentially. And again, I think, and like on the one hand, I'm sharing data that's overwhelming, right? I was going to say slightly, but it's not slightly, it's overwhelming. On the other hand, the practices and procedures in the buildings have I think been really, really good. There's always somebody who's got like a drooping mask or something, but they're kids by and large do a really good job of following guidelines and being attentive. There's lots of hand washing and sanitizing and social distancing. So I don't think that our how we're doing in this is about luck. Sometimes people say your schools are very lucky. I don't think it's about luck. And there's some luck, but I think it's people have been adhering very closely and thoughtfully to guidelines.
No, it's not about luck. It's about people being responsible.
Right.
No.
Corey?
Yep, just a quick question about how you envision using the testing. that the school and the district has access to.
Yeah, so what we have are the and I'm gonna mispronounce it, but the Binex Now rapid test. The slight issue with that, and again, Becky, correct me if I misstate this, is that they're not perfectly accurate. So it's a good like snapshot at a moment in time. And if somebody tests positive, I mean, it's bad that they're testing positive, but it's good that we know it very quickly. If somebody tests negative, they still are getting a more formal PCR test because the likelihood of a false negative is a little higher with the quick tests. As hopefully we get back in the buildings, I'll be sending a blanket permission slip to parents to participate in it. And then if we were to do one, we would likely call the parent before we did it to say, we've got reason to believe it's a good thing to do. Are you okay with us doing it? Staff also have to consent, but they're grown-ups and they can consent on the spot. There's separately, and we looked into this, and this is interesting, the governor and the state is also offering pool testing, which is interesting too. We participated in a webinar. I'm disinclined to sign up for that now because it would, unless we were to hire a set of people to do it discreetly, it might put an impossible burden on our existing staff to do it. And it won't really give us much more information than the information we have now. If we were Williams College and we had a huge endowment and effectively unlimited resources, that may be the gold standard of things, but I don't know that it makes sense to do that right now.
Any other school committee members before I go to the public? Hearing none. Zoe Holmes?
Yeah, Zoe Holmes, 42 Hollenbeck Avenue, Great Barrington. I was just wondering about to what extent you can disclose information about when we do have cases across any of the schools, as far as like confidentiality, exactly how much can like each person with each level of exposure be informed?
Yeah, so and I'm glad you're asking the question because it's a really good one. As a district, we've always made a commitment to be transparent, right, or very transparent. But if you're the person that tests positive, you don't really want to be outed, right? That's not fair. So in the context of the whole contact tracing person, if you are a close contact, so the 15-minute thing I was talking about, then you will be directly contacted that you were a close contact, and then you should you'll get directions, but in the context of that, you would likely quarantine and get tested in the right window. If you're not directly contacted, then as a high school student, you would just know that there was a case in the high school, but because you weren't seen as a close contact, you were not contacted. Does that make sense? Right, so hopefully, I mean, it gives you enough information to take action if you need to take action. The slightly challenging thing on this is, and people say this in data circles all the time, like garbage in, garbage out. If the data that we base our assumptions on are solid and good, then the inferences we draw from them should also be solid and good, right? If somebody tests positive and reports to the contact tracer that they were in 5 classes, but in fact on that day they were in 6 classes, then they might have been in closer contact with an additional subset of people than they revealed. And then the contact tracing thing breaks down. So one of the challenges for the contact tracers is to really dig in and ask 2 or 3 times and have people really rack their brain. Oh, I forgot I went to the laundromat and hung out there for 2 hours, right? And then all of a sudden, all the people in the laundromat for that time could be impacted.
Logan Hunt.
Hi, my name's Logan Hunt. I'm a student lineman, and I just had a question of sort of the school's disciplinary actions towards students violating the code guidelines, because I feel like I see a lot where COVID guidelines aren't really being like held to students when they're being broken, especially at the high school.
Okay, Logan, you're breaking up a little, and I'm guessing you live in New Marlboro, but I'm not 100% sure. But let me.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Let me restate your question a little bit, and then I'll try to answer it. So I think what you're asking about is sort of the disciplinary implications, or how we might hold people accountable to following guidelines when they're not following them. Is that sort of the gist of it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's challenging, right? And at the very beginning of this year, the school committee gave the district-wide latitude to hold people accountable. Which ultimately could result in having somebody forfeit the opportunity to do in-person learning and be obligated to work remotely. My hope would be to not go down that path at all, but to value each other as a community of learners and friends and colleagues, and that in a supportive and positive way, we would remind each other what our obligations are to each other and the community. And if you see somebody not wearing their mask, you say something in a way that doesn't get you in trouble, right? So you're not a snitch, you're just saying, hey, aren't we all wearing our masks? And if that doesn't work or it makes you uncomfortable, you share it with a teacher. And if a para or somebody, and if that doesn't work, it gets kicked up to an administrator. And then it's sort of the end of the line potentially is me, and you shoot me an email and you say, every day in C period algebra, there's this guy that's not wearing a mask. And then lo and behold, the next day, if all these other things fail, I drop in on C period algebra and I find the person who's not wearing the mask and I have a conversation. I don't think we'll get there, and I think a little redirection will probably do it. But we do have the authority to, if somebody's squandering the opportunity and putting their classmates and the staff at risk, we have the opportunity to exclude them from face-to-face learning and have them participate only remotely. And we could and will do that.
Next would be Julian Bedell. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No worries. I'm not sure if Zoe and I can speak with the school committee members, as we're only student members. I wanted to follow up.
Speak. There's no such thing as only student members. You can speak.
Okay. I wanted to follow up on Dr. Dillon's remarks about the rapid testing. And I was just wondering if you could bring clarity to what constitutes the usage of these rapid tests, because you mentioned that they would be used if there was suspicion or there was reason for use. And if you could sort of walk us through what that looks like. And then also, how many tests do we have available to us and how sparing we need to use them?
Yeah, so we got tons. So that's the good news. We actually, and this is sort of inside baseball and probably you don't care about it, but we actually got permission from a state lab to be a test site, right? So the 3 schools in Berkshire Hills plus the Richmond school. So there's a medical order from a doctor allowing us to do this, and our nurses had to go through training to do it. One of the conditions of our license or permission to do the testing is we cannot test people who are asymptomatic, right? So, and again, Becky could talk to this, but there's something like 10 or 12 potential symptoms. Obviously, a fever's one, a sore throat could be another, congestion's another, and on and on and on. And to be tested, you need to present with one of those, right? And it could also be like lethargy. There are a couple others. I don't remember them all. And that's the reason that justifies the test. I think we have several hundred in each building. We could get more, I think, if we needed more. I don't think you want to have 3 tests a day. That would be bizarre. But if you have some sort of symptom on Monday and we have the parent permission, and then you get a test and it's positive, the action's obvious. If it's negative, then you go get another one. If you got back the formal PCR test and that remained negative, and at the end of the week, you needed another test because you were displaying other symptoms, I think you could get another one. If you were like a habitual tester, the nurses might think you were odd after a while, but I don't think there's any limit on testing.
It's definitely for people that are showing symptoms. And there was just something on the news recently that if you test people, you're much more likely to get an accurate result if it's someone that's symptomatic. Like if someone wants to test just so that they can go travel, that's not a reason to do it. And it would be someone that we would be sending home with symptoms anyways. And then they say if you test positive, we accept that as a positive result. If you're negative, you still have to go have a PCR test and quarantine. So it's definitely only for people that are showing symptoms.
And the CDC has a really nice visual about this, where sort of you're exposed, there's a time of incubation, then there's a good window to test after that. But the sort of fear is you're exposed, you test too soon, you get a negative test, you think you're okay, you're hanging out with your grandmother or something, and then we get into spreading and super spreading and all of that. Erica,
Erica, next we have Erica Milkey.
Hi, I do not have a really well worded question as the amazing students did, so bear with me here.
Yeah.
I'm in a really privileged position where being remote does not negatively impact me or my son. He's old enough to stay by himself. He can handle his own schoolwork. Most of my work is from home. But it's recently come, and also I'm totally in agreement with these sites that we're looking at for testing. I mean, with the rates of testing and with high positivity, I will probably opt to have my son be remote even after we go back to hybrid, just because better safe than sorry. But I just wanted to make sure it's in the conversation that the only reason to push for students to be in person is not just because of a worry about missing out on academics or academic decline, it recently came to my attention that there are there's like this population of people, immigrant families and families without adequate internet or with socioeconomic challenges. Sorry, my son is also talking to me at the same time, where it's just come to my attention that there's this population that seems to be falling through the cracks. And I feel like that's important, and I hadn't been thinking about it, even though I like to think of myself as somebody who is aware of these issues and who's fighting for the people without a voice. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that that's one of the reasons to get kids back in. It's not just about catching up on academics.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. There are all sorts of issues around food insecurity, and we've been trying to work really hard on that, and are continuing to share food with families. There are all sorts of issues around social interaction, right? And what being cooped up means. We're social, like people are social. A lot of learning, particularly for younger kids, but really for all of us, is around social interactions. And it's very hard to translate early childhood work into devices, right? Some people might even say it's a terrible idea to try to do it. Then there are all sorts of subpopulations, students with special needs, English language learners, students with a range of disabilities and cognitive impairments and all the rest, and getting them into school, and not just school, the building, but sort of the broad conception of what schooling and interaction and friendships and lunch and recess and doing art and banging on a drum and all of that matters tremendously. So like this is what we're all wrestling with, right? How do you balance safety with this stuff on the other end in some way?
Thanks for that.
Sean,
Peter.
go ahead. Thanks, Erica. Sean, go ahead. Is he still with us? He had his hand up.
His hand's down, but he's muted.
I put his hand down. Unmute yourself, Sean.
Nurse Becky, when would you give a COVID test in the school?
When would we use the rapid testing?
Yeah.
If when children or staff have COVID symptoms, what we would send them home for before we had the test, headache, fever over 100, congestion, stuffy nose, gastrointestinal symptoms. So if someone came to us with those symptoms, they would go home automatically in quarantine for 10 days, or they would go get a COVID test, a PCR test. So now we have the rapid tests. When someone comes in symptomatic, we can, if we have permission from the parent, do the rapid test on those students that are symptomatic that we would have sent home anyways. So they're going to be going home anyhow, but we can test them, and if they're positive, then the parents made aware, and then we would report that also to the Department of Public Health and DESE that we had a positive rapid test.
So essentially, when a student or staff member shows up in your office, you would say, okay, go home, and well, can we do a test? If you're an adult, you can. So then you're going to call the parent to see if you can do a test on them prior to them going home?
Peter's going to send home permission slips. So we would need a parent signature in order to perform the test. They say we can get a verbal okay, but it would be best case scenario to have a parent signature on file already. And then, yes, and then we would test them. And
That's,
no matter what the result, they would go home because they're symptomatic.
yes, I just want, I mean, if this is what we're gonna do, then we need to get those forms out to parents immediately.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And the because we're in remote, we'll get them out to parents in advance of us being back, assuming we're back and whenever we're back, right? So we have a little bit of time. I think that the turnaround is when we have parents sign forms all the time, and this one is really important, and we hope the turnaround would be quick. I'm also going to look into doing it, and maybe some of you have done this before, but sometimes there are documents you can sign electronically, like with DocuSign or something else. So to share it that way, so people with devices can turn it around instantaneously, and those count from a legal perspective, and then we could support the small number of people who aren't able to do it that way.
Yeah, this has been a good discussion tonight. I appreciate this, Peter. Very detailed, and I think it made us realize, for those of us who may not have realized how much you have to go through, it'll make snow days look a lot easier.
Yeah, I miss calling snow days in comparison. And I really like the three nurses in Berkshire Hills and Christina in Richmond have been very, very helpful on this. The local health agent in Great Barrington, Rebecca Jerzyk, is really helpful. Leslie Drager, the public health nurse that we work with most, is very helpful. There's another one who's also great too. And we speak with doctors at McEnany and CHP, and they've been helpful, and Heather Barbieri at Fairview. The other thing that I think is hopeful, and you may be aware of this if you've been reading the Eagle, yesterday we started at Du Bois with a vaccination clinic for first responders. And that went very well. That's going to continue on Saturday too. And they're all phase 1 people, right? So many, if not all, doctors and nurses have been vaccinated. Now firefighters and EMTs are. There's a lot going on in the congregate care settings and some of the assisted living places. And then the next group, as I understand it, are seniors, teachers, educators, and folks with multiple comorbidities. So in a month, we may be in a significantly better place than we are right now. So
Peter, I know educators are not only in the next phase with the priority, they've got a priority slot in it. So all the staff will be required to get vaccinated, correct?
It's a little premature to say that. I'm waiting on guidance, and obviously there's probably something to be discussed and even negotiated. There's some people who can't be vaccinated because they've got particular medical conditions, and one of those that is like a history of anaphylaxis, right? But there are other conditions too. Somebody with a very compromised system might not be able to. So that's probably a subset. The other tension is the time from vaccination to the time when people are covered, right? So apparently you get some immunity, and the medical professionals on the call will understand this better than me, right? But you get some immunity with the first vaccination, and then additional immunity with the second one, and some of that doesn't kick in. At each time, there are different points where it kicks in. So I share it because it's not like the panacea, but I share it because we're in the middle of the most challenging public health thing in probably all our lifetimes. And it's nice to see the light at the end of the tunnel. What I can't say is the light at the end of the tunnel in February or June, right? But there is a light, so I'm happy about that. And I'll circle back as I get more guidance. Does everybody have to get vaccinated is probably a question that gets answered by somebody with more authority than me.
Okay, moving ahead. Subcommittee reports.
Oh, Steve, there was one other thing, and I know this is going a little long, that I said I'd share a little bit about time. So the state gave us guidelines in the summer to plan for the start of school around time and time on learning and other things. And those guidelines were pretty open-ended. And then in my timing's off a little bit, but then in October, they asked us to look at a 2-week period in grades, I think 1, 4, 7, and 10, and write what our schedule was. And then they reviewed how we wrote what our schedule was and gave us either a conditional pass or do some more work. They gave us a conditional pass. And then, like the state often does, they move the goalposts several times. And the initial guidance was you had to have a certain number of hours of minutes of instruction a week, and we exceeded that. And so we got the conditional pass in all 3 buildings. Then the revised thing was not only do you have to have a certain total number of hours, but you have to have a minimum number of hours on each day. And then the kicker to that was whether you're in person, remote, or hybrid, the state made a distinction between synchronous, so like live time work, or asynchronous work, which would be some sort of guided individual study. The structure we came up with, in many ways, I'm really happy about, and I actually think is sort of brilliant, which is the 4 cohorts. So cohort A would be in 4 days a week. Cohorts B and C would be in alternately Mondays and Tuesdays, or Thursdays and Fridays. And Wednesday was a day for check-ins, and then cleaning and teacher professional development. And then cohort D, which we don't talk a lot about, is the group of students who were working entirely remotely. Then, to make things more complicated, when we started bringing back the elementary school students, with the exception of pre-K because of what I explained before, but the K through 4th grade in 4 days a week, we easily far exceeded the minutes, but we're a little vulnerable on Wednesdays. And that's something that we're talking about. And this shift to more synchronous time on Wednesdays from a state perspective is meant to go into effect next week. So we're continuing to talk about it. And then different school districts in different contexts came up with different plans. So a neighboring district decided to go with half days, or really slightly less than half days, 5 days a week. We didn't do that largely because of busing considerations, and the geography of our 3 towns made it undoable, or at least in my mind, in the bus company's mind, in the principal's minds, undoable. So some districts have approached it that way with half days. Some districts are using the Wednesdays like we are. Some districts are doing other things. And then the other thing I should mention, when the state gave us its conditional approval, that was at a moment in time many, many months ago. So how we're approaching this continues to evolve. There is specific guidance around what Wednesdays, or for that matter, any day, we just picked Wednesdays, can look like. And to varying degrees, all our schools on Wednesdays do spend some time to check in with kids. In the elementary school, it's sort of more as a morning meeting, and in the middle and high school, it's called crew in the middle school and advisory in the high school. But over time, that work on Wednesdays may continue to evolve. There's also a challenging distinction where we had been using Wednesdays in some point to target individual kids with specific needs, and the state is encouraging us to make those offerings available to all kids. So very much a work in progress. From a staff perspective, we valued the Wednesdays to do some cleaning, and we've also valued the Wednesdays to drive and support professional development connected to our learning management system, Canvas, and all the complexities there, and then connected to curriculum work, assessment, and case management, checking in on kids and how they're doing, and reaching out to parents. But again, this may evolve some over time. But I wanted to flag that and share that. And I think, Steve, there's a strong possibility some school committee members may have questions about it, or some participants in the meeting may. So I'm happy to respond to those.
I have more of a comment and a question is, I have no doubt that we're fully complying with whatever regulatory scheme, and that's fine. But that's not really my concern. I just want to make sure we're maximizing the experience our students have throughout this kind of up and down roller coaster. And so, I mean, that I think is a sentiment shared by a lot of people who have concerns about kind of the lack of with the synchronous, not whatever, where you're actually seeing a teacher and talking to a teacher on a screen. I think that's where that comes from. I know people frame it as, some kind of regulatory thing. I don't think that's a concern. I think people just want to make sure that we're doing best by our kids. And as they see the amount of face time slipping and slipping away, I think that raises concerns about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's valid. The principals and I and the administrative team talk about this regularly. We're in ongoing conversations with teachers about it too. I think the lesson we learned from this is, just as we sort of come up with a plan, the plan needs to continue to evolve, right? So the one certainty is sort of all this uncertainty, and we need to keep tweaking and shifting and making things better, and we'll continue to put a lot of energy into that and doing that. Some of the hopeful proposals around the elementary school and the early grades in the middle school were born out of this need and desire to get more kids back into face-to-face, in-person learning on a regular basis, right? And we have the best plans in the world to do that. We're just limited by the numbers and our circumstances, and hopefully we get there soon. So I think we have the capacity to shift. We've done it more than I'd like, sometimes for external reasons, but I think those conversations will keep going, and we'll try to continue to move that forward. And focusing on our youngest kids, I think, is important. Focusing on our high needs kids is important. Focusing on more face-to-face time for all our kids, whether it's in a face-to-face or a hybrid or a remote model is also important. So I think we'll just keep working toward that.
Anyone else before we move on? Amanda Hockler, go right ahead.
So Peter, thanks for taking some time to address that tonight, because I know it's definitely been a concern of mine. So knowing that the state guidelines keep changing, I know that's not fair, but how do you plan to be in compliant with the face-to-face requirement that starts next week for the kids in the district on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. It's not, it's by no means totally solved. Some of it is directly subject to negotiation, and we'll work on that. And some of it's around planning. There's also, and we've not fully explored this route, we far exceed the face-to-face time on our other days. So there's also a route where one could petition the commissioner for a waiver. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that is.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. And you know, for my younger kids, I have a first grader and I have a fourth grader, and they meet with their teachers 4 days a week in the hybrid model. But I guess I wondered, like on Wednesday in the elementary school, if it's about 10 of the same kids with the same teacher in the same space every single day, why do they really need that time to turn over the classroom on Wednesday when there's really not different people in there? And then in the middle school, what hybrid has looked like for my son is that Monday and Tuesday he goes to school, he gets 12 hours of instruction. On Wednesday, he gets a hey, how you doing meeting in the morning. And the teachers care, like they're thoughtful, like they really reach out to him and say, hey, Ev, what can we do for you today? But the interaction is limited. And then on Thursday and Friday, in a hybrid model, it's still that limited interaction with a list of things to do. So really in 5th grade, my son has been to school 11 days in person, and he's had 3 days a week pretty much where he's kind of on his own. And so I think I've been advocating with the teachers who have called me, who have been wonderful in trying to extend opportunities for Evan. I'm no fault of their own, but I've called Ben and Peter, I've talked to you, and I've talked to the school committee, and I have emailed and spoken, and we keep talking about, there's an acknowledgement that this needs to get better, but we've been talking about it since October 26th, and it's the middle of January. And so I'd really like, before we conclude the meeting today, to come up with some action steps and a timeline for when this might actually get better. And then another thing I want to say is I totally understand that you're in a tough place and that we're looking at a 5.6% positivity rate in our district. But we looked at Bristol County with their 13% positivity rate, and I grew up in the Attleboro Public Schools, and they're going to go back to school on Tuesday. And so I wonder, can we look a little bit at some of the data in some of those districts where we are at 13% and just kind of see what their spread looks like? And maybe consider pool testing if I know Desi's going to cover that for 6 weeks. If we can put kids into a classroom every day and pool test them once a week and get a batch test back that comes back negative or one that comes back positive, I think we might be able to feel pretty good that we're sending our kids to school with peers that are not positive. It might be a way for us to get back into school, because I'm thinking about poor Evan, who hasn't been to school since November 7th.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I don't think we're going to hash out a timeline in this call. I don't think it's the right place, and there are other implications. Part of the plan is for the 5th and 6th graders to be back 4 days a week when we get back to school, assuming sort of all the pieces fall together. So that addresses quite a bit of what you're talking about. We've had internally within the district several conversations about what Wednesdays can look like and what else can happen there. We've also had conversations about how the virtual days can be more robust. So, and what I want to be really deliberate. I don't want to talk to you again, a month from now with nothing having changed. I think there'll be significant changes in the next in the next several weeks. The interesting thing, right? So like the North Shore is a mess, and their numbers are through the roof, and some of those places are open, and some of them are closed. In Berkshire County right now, I think as of today, the only district that is open is, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but is Richmond, which is my other district, right? So Southern Berkshire announced today, Lee announced today, Lennox, I think, has hopes of going back next week.
Yeah, we're planning to go back Tuesday.
Right, but Lennox's start was maybe bumpier than some other districts. Hancock had been open fully, everybody. It's a teeny school, 54 kids, maybe 52 kids, and they just closed. So
Yeah, no, I get it. And I know it's a hard thing, but I think that when the governor addressed the state the other day, what he really tried to offer schools in offering the pool testing was a tool that would allow kids to go back to school, because it's important. And it's not just for academic reasons. Like there are a whole lot of social, emotional reasons that kids need to be back to school. And I feel terrible for the kids, particularly in our district, who just have horrible internet connections. They can't show their faces to their friends because they need to divert the power from the video into the microphone so they can even be heard. I mean, I really think being in person is important, but even more than being in person, I think that if we're going to be home in a remote model, that has to be quality. And I value that the teachers need the time. And I know at the end of the day, my kids are tired. And so maybe we could think about shaving an hour off the end of the day to give it to teachers for prep time or professional development, and add some time on Wednesday so it doesn't feel like such a waste.
yeah, no, I hear you. And again, different people characterize it differently, but you're not an outlier on this. You're one of
I
dozens.
know I'm squeaky and I apologize, but I'm
No.
advocating for my kids. Like I want the best for my kids. I mean, we talk about unprecedented time, but unprecedented was the spring. We're 310 days into this and we know some things now. And I know we're afraid. I'm afraid too. And I wonder, should I send my kids to school or shouldn't I? But I go to a school building and I'm going to go back with my students this coming week. And I think that it's important. And, you know, I think that if we saw that when we had positive cases in Berkshire County in our schools, if peers and teachers in those classrooms were good with the safety measures that we had in place, I'd like to think that they are kind of safe places to be. Even if we're scared, I'm scared too. I never know if it's the right thing. And I know you don't know whether it's the right thing, but that's why I feel like we've got to look at data a little bit. We've got to look to see the superintendent in Attleboro, he's got to be really scared right now sending his kids back to school with a 13% positivity rate. But let's see how that looks and how that goes for them, and really talk about if DESE's going to pay for the testing for 6 weeks so that we know our classes are okay. Let's take advantage of it for at least 6 weeks while our testing is high.
No, yeah. So, and just to clarify the testing thing, so we really looked at it. That they're covering the cost of the test is great, but there's this other embedded cost in it that they're not covering, which is the cost of having nurses do the testing,
So
right?
do nurses have to do it? We can't sit in a classroom and say, okay, boys and girls, we're gonna sanitize your hands. I want everyone to tickle their nose and we all just throw it. Are they mandating it's done by a nurse?
Yeah, they're very, very clear guidelines around it, and I'll dig it up and share it. I mean, I think the one exception they made in some places is instead of nurses doing it, they're having EMTs do it. But I don't know if it. We had this whole conversation about it. I don't know if it gives us much more than the rapid test gives us right now, right? The only bummer is the pool testing lets you target asymptomatic people, and the rapid test is limited.
It's only symptomatic people, which is why I thought, I mean, Cora's in college. They're using the testing once a week at Endicott, and it's been a great way for them to catch those asymptomatic kids and get them into quarantine before they can infect anybody. It seemed to work pretty
No,
well.
I know it's working. I have a son in college, and they get tested 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And it's great, but they're paying, I think, and again, the state would cover this, right? But they're paying, like, through the Broad Institute, $50 a kid, so, or a young person, $150 a week for a 16 or 20 week semester times 3
So-
days.
Middlebury is, it cost, the president of Middlebury was on PBS. It's $5 million. I mean, this
So
is.
let's,
So can we
Sean, you have,
the governor's office and just say this?
hold on.
Oh.
Hold on. Let's control this a little bit. Sean, you have your hand up next.
Yeah, Nurse Becky.
She's here.
Yes, yes.
Do we have pool testing capabilities at any of our schools?
Well, I read about it, but I didn't do the call that Peter and I think Rhonda was on the call, and Hillary and maybe Christina. And my understanding is that it pretty much tests the entire student body and staff. I'm not sure how often, if it's on a weekly basis. And then and I'm not sure how many swabs go into one of the pools. And then if, say it's 30, I'm not sure, 20, if that pool comes back positive, then each one of those people has to have a test done. So that's more testing. So,
So,
swabbing.
My question is, do we have that capability now? And if-
I wouldn't say we wouldn't, literally the nurses in each school probably wouldn't have time to do their regular job if we're running around doing pool
Right.
testing.
So Becky,
So
let
go
me
ahead.
add a little to it. Sean, we definitively don't have the capacity to do it.
Thank
So there are a couple things, right? So we would have to manage all testing logistics, including overseeing administration, data entry, software, administer specimen collection for students and staff, administer any follow-up with the testing company, and transport the samples to a lab once a day. And so we just don't have the capacity. We could contract with somebody to do it, but
well, there you go.
Right, but it could be really, really expensive, and I don't know that it gives us much more useful information than we already have access to, right? And if we were going to spend, and I'm just going to throw out a number, $200,000, $400,000, $600,000, would you want to spend it on a robusting testing protocol that gives us a little value add, or would you want to spend it on tutors, counselors, or somebody may bring up a little later today, running a enhanced summer program, right? I mean, there are a whole host of possibilities there.
Okay, so I think we've had this discussion and we're ready to move on. I think it's been a good discussion. I think we've learned a lot, and I think we've heard a lot of points of view. So let's move on, and I'm sure.
I know you're calling out. I just want to say something Peter touched on at the end about a discussion of the
Yes.
summer program,
Yes.
potential for that. I know I brought it up in a number of other meetings. We're going to be making budget decisions over the last couple of months. I'd like the administration to start putting their heads together on that for a more educated conversation of it, sometime down the road.
No,
Yes.
I think that's really good. And just a little contextual thing. Right now, we really run 2 summer programs. We run a program for special needs students who are entitled or get additional services. And then we run Project Connection, which is through our 21st Century grant. I think what Rich is talking about and what I'll share with the principals and we'll look into is, could we do something else in the summer that would be high interest and engaging and afford students a wide range of academic and social opportunities. And I think that's worth looking into, and we'll put our heads together and come back to this group with some ideas around that.
Thank you, Steve. I'm sorry.
No. It's a subject that we need to talk about. Subcommittee's report. Policy has not met. Buildings and grounds, Jason.
We have not met.
Superintendent's evaluation.
I think we scheduled and did Doreen schedule a meeting for us?
I think she sent out the Genius, whatever it is, but I haven't heard yet a date.
Okay.
I can get one, so put my email on there, please.
Yeah, it's because you're in transition.
I'm in transition, yes.
Technology subcommittee has not met. Rich, we have a finance coming up.
We do. We delayed the one today. I forget the date on the next one. But we're kind of somewhat in a holding pattern, just waiting for the governor's budget, which will be out in 2 weeks. So.
Okay, and I don't think there's anything on district consolidation and sharing subcommittee. Anything on the personnel report?
Yeah, if it's okay.
Of course.
Let me just
hold on, Peter. I'm sorry for the committees. For the what's it called? The Regional School District Planning Board.
Mhm.
Yes.
We need a Stockbridge citizen volunteer.
Sean, I spoke today to Michael Canales. I think that group's all set, and the moderator appointed 3 people today.
Okay. We just got called out in the last meeting, and I sent an email to Mike today and spoke with some people at town hall earlier when I was getting sworn in.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll have everybody showing up for those meetings.
Yeah, no, I think it happened tonight, or I think it's happening right now at their select board meeting. The town moderator is appointing the 3 people.
Okay.
Terrific. This is good. This is terrific. Peter, you had something on personnel?
Oh yeah, so I don't always do this, but as you notice in the personnel report, 3 people are retiring, and I'd really like to thank all 3 of them for their service. They all work in different roles. They've all been in the district for quite some time, and they're all really quite special. So one of them is Scott Anand, who's currently a teacher at the high school and had been the assistant principal there. And he's really been tremendously impactful. We talk a lot at Monument about that metal statue and how do you make your mark on Monument. And it's clear that Scott's had a real impact there. So he's not going just yet, but he is at the end of June. We'll celebrate him in this unusual year and really appreciate what he's done. So that's one. The next one is Kathy Borkard, and she's been with the district for a very long time too. She's the one who works in accounts payable, and she's why people get paid on time almost all the time, right? And really not individuals as much as vendors, scholarships, all sorts of things like that. And I'd like to recognize her service. She's going a little bit earlier in March, and she's been a real asset to the district. And then the third one, also at the high school, is Nancy Bonnick, and she's a paraprofessional, and she's been here a very long time. And and I think comes with the same energy today that she probably had on her first day dozens of years ago. Really wonderful, cares deeply about young people and her colleagues. So it's sad when people retire, and it's also a celebration and a testament of their work. So I'd like to really acknowledge those three people. And when you see them remotely, say something nice. And when we start seeing each other again in person, say something nice, socially distanced.
Thank you, Peter. Any old or new business? Any public comment other than what we've had? I'm not seeing any. I'll just give it a second. Excellent meeting tonight, and by unanimous consent, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.